Welcome back to MVM. Today we're going to be taking a look at the game Ice, which is coming out soon. It's actually on Kickstarter right now. This is a competitive game about excavating a city that was buried under the ice generations ago. This is kind of a fantasy game in that you're going to be taking on the role of a leader of a guild, and there are several different guilds like the alchemists and the navigators that have different powers that allow you to interact with the ice in different ways. Now you're going to see in front of me that the ice board has already been set up. Now this is of course a prototype component. What they're doing here is very unique, and I'm not sure that I've seen anything like this before. You've got this big hexagonal board with all of these hexagon tiles laid out in it, but beneath each one there's another layer of ice. So as you chip away at each layer of ice, you're going to be finding artifacts and eventually getting deeper and deeper into the ruins of this fallen, forgotten city until you uncover an edifice tile, which is going to trigger the end of the game, and those are actually buried at the deepest level. So while it might be difficult to tell just from this video, this is a multi-layered component, and this is going to be made of different quality than what you see here, but this will give you kind of a very good example of how the game is played. These tiles are all going to be set out randomly, and you're going to build stack after stack after stack until you get to this top ice layer. You're going to notice a bunch of different features on the ice that are going to interact with the way that you can move around the board. You have areas like these mountains that are harder to dig through, and then you have these ice shelves that are harder to move through. You also have these little cave sites where you're going to have some archaeologists that are pre-seated on the board. You're also going to have a random tile that is the starting base camp. And each player is going to choose a guild. They're going to have one additional camp that they can play with that guild, and they're going to have their lead explorer in that color. In addition, they're going to have a player board that's going to track the actions that they can take on their turn, and it's going to show all the different types of artifacts that you can recover. So these are the 5 different types that you'll see, and they have this symbol on them, and these artifacts will also be buried on the ice. The reason that you're trying to collect these artifacts is to fulfill these contracts. There's going to be a number of contracts sitting out on the board. You're going to have 3 here in a 5-player game, but that number will change based on the number of players. And every player is competing to turn in artifacts in order to achieve these goals and score victory points. In addition, every player is going to be handed a set of cards at the beginning of the game that are private objectives that only they can fulfill. And you're going to have to take the artifacts that you uncover and deliver them to this city board, where you're going to place them in your guild's specific space. This is going to be how you track the objectives that you've completed and the victory points that you'll earn during the game. Now the game is going to be played with each player taking a turn, spending those actions. Like I said, you're going to have 6 to spend on your turn. You're going to be able to do that in as many rounds as you'd like, as in you can spend 1 action, you can spend up to 3 actions. So you could theoretically just be taking 2 turns around, or you could be taking 6 actions. Now, each one of these actions requires a different number of action points. For example, it's just going to cost 1 action point to move your explorer around the board. Your explorer is going to be the one that actually digs out tiles, but along the way, they can pick up and take archaeologists with them. Now this is important because archaeologists are going to help you dig through the ice. Not only that, you can actually use opponents to help you dig through the ice as well. So having other explorers, even not your own color, is going to help you dig. I'm not saying that there's a cooperative element in this game. It is purely competitive. But if you do work together with another player, it's going to be easier for both of you to dig out the ice in that area. So you're going to see these kind of, I don't want to call them alliances, but these uneasy pacts that kind of form where it's like, hey, if we stick together, we're both going to have an easier time. Because it's going to cost a certain number of actions to dig through each level of the ice. But that is reduced by every archaeologist and every other player that happens to be on that spot. Now, you can kind of mess with other players by coming in and taking away the archaeologists that they just placed there, because any player can control these archaeologists. You can call more archaeologists out. You can spawn your own camps and bring archaeologists to them. which is a good strategy that you're going to want to do over and over again to populate the board. I mean, you can have a ton of these archaeologists out on the board at once, and of course, you're going to want to group them together. You can carry up to 3 with you every time you leave. But the real meat of the game is going to be digging through the ice. Wherever your explorer happens to be, you can dig that tile by spending the right amount of action points. You're going to remove the tile and you're going to see whatever it gives you. Now, these ice tiles that make up the very, very top layer are all going to be some kind of special ability tile. These are going to kind of come in front of you, and they're almost going to form a hand or a deck of tiles that you can use to do specific abilities. So these are going to be handy. So you want to get as many of the top ice tiles as you can in order to trigger their abilities. And as you do that, you'll start to clear them out, and you'll start to see that there are other tiles underneath. Now, once a tile has been exposed, or if there is only one tile covering it, for example, if this one tile was all that was in the way, I could actually dig through this tile directly to expose this one. Once you get down to the second level, that's when you actually start seeing these artifacts. So if this was my situation here, and blue has already dug through, then blue could actually take this tile, and this is where you're going to see some of those artifacts. Now this one happens to be a wild. It can be any one of these artifact types. And artifacts are going to come in two varieties. They're going to come in activated and unactivated artifacts. And you'll be able to tell the difference based on the artwork, because the artwork is kind of glowing with the activated ones. You want to collect artifacts for two reasons. One, I talked about to turn them in to the city for objectives. And two, each artifact can give you a special power. So in addition to the power of your guild that you already have, every set of these tiles is going to unlock something different. And this is going to vary based on how many tiles you have. You need to have a combination of different amounts of activated or inactivated artifacts in order to gain that artifact's ability. And of course, there'll be a player aid that shows you what all these abilities do. However, when you turn in your artifacts to the city, you then lose access to that power. So you need to decide the right time to turn those in, because you really want to use these powers as much as possible. But every time you clear out a space on the board, you're going to assign the workers to the tiles that were below it. So you're going to place the archaeologists and your explorers on these different tiles and split them up. Now you're going to be digging through repeatedly. You might end up in situations where a tile has everything around it completely taken off. If that's the case, there's really nothing for this tile to stand on anymore, and it's going to collapse as well. So that's going to kind of help you move through these tile spaces a little faster and to dig a little deeper. However, if one of the tiles that falls off contains a camp, this will trigger an exhibition, and every player will get to turn in their artifacts to claim those objective cards. So you'll see on these request objectives what it needs to be completed. You'll simply take that, you'll place it on your side. I'm the alchemist, so I place this here on the alchemist player board, showing that I have delivered that alchemist, and I will complete an objective. Now the points that you're going to get from objectives vary. Some of them are going to give you a flat out point bonus. Some of them are going to award you points at the end of the game based on what you've done. For example, this one will give you more points if you have the most obliteration artifacts, and that's one of the types of artifacts that you can gain. Now the key here is not just to collect as many possible tiles as you can. You want to try to collect specific tiles. And of course you can see on the back of each one of these what kind of artifact it is, but it doesn't tell you if the artifact is activated or inactivated until you draw it. Then it's going to come into your play area and sit on your player board. Now, as you get deeper, the tiles are going to get darker to show you that you're making progress through to the very, very bottom. The game will continue on until eventually one player reaches the depths of the ice and reveals one of those edifice tiles. Once an edifice tile is completely exposed, that's going to trigger the end of the game. In addition, the end of the game will occur when one player has completed 7 objective cards. The last way that the game can end is after 10 rounds. So if there's been 10 rounds or 10 days and no one has completed one of those things, then you're going to end the game anyway. Along the way, you're going to need to be really careful. Like I said, you could end up with some pieces of ice that are just left hanging, which will collapse, which can kill archaeologists and send your characters back to your player board for you to have to redeploy at a later state. So there are a lot of dangers that can be hidden in this ice, and you're also going to have the special effects of other players' powers and of their ice tiles that have special abilities that they might play. At the end of the game, no matter which way the game ends, you're going to count up everybody's victory points. These victory points are only scored via the cards that you have played in front of you or the objectives that you've completed. Like I said earlier, each one of these is going to give you a different scoring method. So you might have completed an objective, but if you don't actually have whatever the objective wants you to have at the end of the game, you might not get a lot of points for it, or you might not get points for it at all, depending on how it plays out. Each player is going to add up those objectives, and whoever has the most prestige points is going to be declared the winning guild. Now, there are a lot of different variants that you can play with this. There are some special animal tiles that you can add in. Of course, I've got prototypes here, but there's bovines and giant snakes that can come out. And there's other types of tiles that can be added into the board as well to kind of make the experience a little more difficult or a little more unique. And you can see all of this on their Kickstarter page, which is live right now, including what the final version of this board is going to look like. It looks really cool. It's a lot neater than this prototype that I have here in front of me, although the way this prototype is layered is really unique. I'm not sure that I've seen anything quite like this before. So take a look at their Kickstarter page, and as always, come back here. Let me know what you're most excited about when it comes to ICE, and thank you for liking, subscribing, and following us here at MVM, and I will see you next time.
Congratulations, you got to the end of one of our videos. Now, if you want more practice, just click on the video over here. It's another video. You might not have seen it yet, so click on it. If you don't want to do that, at least click on the subscription button below. That always helps us. And if you want notifications, please ring that bell.